Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So, we have been talking about listening, and we've also been talking about prejudice, which blocks listening. Prejudice just means prejudgment. You're judging someone. And I wanted to speak a little bit more about prejudice today, because it's such an interesting phenomena. And I was thinking about myself. I grew up in a very homogeneous culture, whereas my daughter has grown up in a very multicultural environment. The world is different. And so my daughter was telling me, she said that children, they're not naturally prejudiced. They naturally make friends with everyone, and they learn prejudice as they grow up. And she said that I'm raised in a multicultural environment. Of course, she went to Gurukul, so she had friends from all around the country. But even in America now, we have things aren't as segregated as they were when I was young. So when I was young, I lived in a neighborhood where everyone was the same. I think there was only one African American in my high school that I remember, at least that I can remember. There was only one. It's not like we didn't like him or anything. But there's often a tendency to become prejudiced when you don't interact with people. So in my neighborhood, it was all white. It was upper middle class area. I would say 99.999%, if not 100%, went on to university, became successful. They're all of the same religion, the same thinking. And so just looking at my own self, even though I am a devotee, and prejudice has to do with bodily consciousness, I can say, well, I'm probably better off than my friends who aren't devotees in terms of prejudice. But still, when you're raised with one class of people, one group of people, there's a tendency to judge other people using your standards as the absolute standards, because that's what you know, that's what you're used to. So you'll find people of one group disliking people of another group because the people of the other group are different. That different doesn't mean better or worse necessarily. But we tend to think that different means worse, isn't it? Oh, he's different. Different means worse or bad or strange. Generally, it could mean better. But often for us it means it's something I'm not used to, and we may consider it to be bad. So it's just a reality that we all, at least that I grew up in, and my generation grew up in, and probably a lot of you grew up in. So that we tend to judge other ethnicities because they seem to be homogeneous. They're all these. It seems to us all these people are like this. All the people from this country are like this. We generalize, and so even though we're devotees and we understand we're not the body, bodily consciousness, it goes very deep. Extremely deep, like really deep, as you've probably noticed, right? It's extremely deep. So any kind of prejudice generally has some connection with my identity, and I'm comparing you to me. And so you're from this country, then I generalize, well, people in this country are like this, and then I I like you or I don't like you. Prejudice could be positive, it could be negative. But I think for us, this is not the only consideration. This is just like pre-ISKCON conditioning. I like certain people, I don't like certain people. I was not raised around black people, I was not raised around Mexican people. I was not raised around anybody other than white Americans who had money, who were educated, and who were Jewish. That's who I was raised around. So, does that mean I'm prejudiced against other people? I try not to be. Does it? But still, it's there just because of conditioning. But the other thing that is important for us to understand, acknowledge, that some of the most prejudiced people in the world are religious people. And so, it's just a fact that and so why are religious people prejudiced? Because they think they're better because they've been saved or whatever. Now, so how should we deal with that? It's very interesting how a real devotee, pure devotee, sees people. And although neophytes or kanishtas, which are what we would find with most religious fanatical people, they're very kanishta. I think they're the best. The pure devotee has it just the opposite. He thinks I'm the lowest. So he is prejudiced in the sense that he sees everybody better. So it's interesting, isn't it? Now, I was also thinking this morning how we have the word karmi. And karmi means literally it means someone who's a fruitive worker or someone who's creating karma by their actions. And so we've used that word to generalize non-devotees. They're karmis. Prejudice is the topic. Listening without prejudice. Or how being prejudiced affects our ability to listen to people. Because we're evaluating or judging what they're saying, which may not be what they're saying, but we may be evaluating them with prejudices gained as devotees or before we're devotees, or both. So, the word karmi, when I say the word karmi, what do you think? Or what do you feel? I think for many devotees, the word karmi is a derogatory word. Well, the meat-eating karmis, or it's like it makes us better. But it's a very kanishta attitude. Of course, a Madhyamadikari has to distinguish between who's a devotee and who's not a devotee. But he has to know who to preach to, who not to preach to. But he doesn't hate non-devotees. In fact, the whole principle of bhakti is that you're not. It's like Mahaprabhu, he didn't discriminate. He gave Krishna consciousness to everyone. So by spreading the Sankirtan movement, we overcome prejudice because we don't see people based on maybe our previous notion. Oh, here's a Mexican, here's a black, here's a Puerto Rican, here's a Russian. So I have all these conceptions of what they're like and what I like about them and what I don't like about them. But when you're spreading Krishna consciousness, you don't think like that. You just think, here's mercy and I should give it to them. And when Prabhupada was asked, or a man was challenging Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was criticizing non-devotees for their actions, or making some distinction. And the man said, well, you're supposed to be pure, but you don't. It doesn't seem like you're equal to everyone. And Prabhupada said, my equality is that equally I give Krishna to everyone. And the man accepted that was the highest form of equality. So we have so many prejudices, but But when we give Krishna consciousness, we're forced to overcome those prejudices and give Krishna consciousness equally to everyone, even if it's a class of people that maybe before we were devotees we didn't like, or we were even afraid of, or we thought that these people are very low class or degraded, whatever we thought, whatever crazy ideas we may have had. And then when we preach Krishna consciousness, we're forced to see everyone equally. It doesn't work. It doesn't work if you don't see everyone equally. It doesn't work if you don't overcome prejudice. And you don't like to be judged. And so when people, like Prabhupada said, it's interesting things Prabhupada said about preaching and about book distribution. And one of the things he said about book distribution is that if people feel that you're their friend, if they feel that you have their interest in mind and you're trying to help them, they'll take a book. And obviously, no one's going to take anything from you if they think you're trying to get something from them or you're trying to cheat them, isn't it? But if they feel that you're actually interested in them and that you're not trying to get something from them or judging them or putting them down, you're going to hell. If you don't take this book, you're going to hell. It's just that simple. So who's going to take the book if you say that? But if they feel that you're not judging them and you're just trying to help them, they go, I like this guy. Yeah, I like him. I like what he's saying. Because it's not just what you're saying, but they're feeling your mood and your mentality. And everyone who's done book distribution always says that my mentality, my attitude is what's affecting my results, because people are affected by your attitude. And anytime you go out to preach and you don't really want to be there and you're just feeling like, I don't want to deal with these people today, I just can't see another non-devotee, it doesn't work. But when you're feeling like, I want to help these people, and some kind of sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, the sense of humanity that we're all the same. And I've been fortunate enough to get Krishna's mercy, and I want to share that. That's when people reciprocate. So then the question can be, how, as devotees, do we remain humble? But because if you objectively look at our lives, and you look at the lives of many, many people, you'll see there's a huge difference. We don't eat meat, they do. We don't drink, they do. We don't gamble, they do. We don't have illicit sex, they do. There's so many things we don't do. And so naturally, we could feel superior. And the way I've processed that for myself is that I never actually felt better, but I always felt more fortunate. And I've noticed, you probably noticed this also, that oftentimes it's not one's intelligence or skill that makes them better, but it's their association, it's the teachers, it's the books they've read. If you've ever had a good teacher, like in high school, the high school I went to, there were a couple of teachers, this was the late 60s, so there were a couple of teachers who were hippies. And they would open our minds up to all kinds of things we never thought about. And everyone appreciated these teachers. They said, these teachers really made me a better person, more intellectual, more thoughtful. So it's not that the students were necessarily more intellectual, more thoughtful, whatever, but the teacher made them that way. So now that they took the class, they could say, well, I think I have an edge on the other students in terms of how I see myself in the world and how I deal with people. Not because they're better, but because they had a better teacher. So the way I always felt about my position as a devotee is not that I'm better than others, but I'm more fortunate. And the real fortune is, as Prabhupada said, take advantage of your fortune. So I'm fortunate that I've been exposed to Krishna consciousness, and I'm fortunate that I've taken advantage. So, if we wanted to say we're better, it's just that we're more fortunate. and fortunate to have taken, somehow or other, by some fortune, we've taken to Krishna consciousness. But a devotee doesn't think he's better. He thinks he's fortunate. And because he's been given Krishna consciousness, maybe you can say, okay, our activities are better. We're not destroying the world in the way non-devotees might be. Or we're not committing sin in the way non-devotees. But without Prabhupada's mercy, without the association of devotees, we would be. So we may even be worse than the people we're preaching to if we didn't have Krishna consciousness. So in that sense, we don't think we're better. And then, of course, the Uttama Adhikari thinks that he has no devotion. So that's also interesting. And you can't imitate that, of course. There's no way you can imitate that. But that's how they see. So the problem that we face is the Kanishta. Kanishta means the beginning, or of three stages. Kanishta would be stage one. And so the Kanishta tendency it's around us, it's there, and it feeds into previous prejudices that we've developed. It also feeds into our pride of the need to be recognized, the need to be better. So sometimes we allow previous prejudices to infect us, or we develop prejudices as devotees. And then we start judging devotees, or seeing devotees who are, oh, this devotee, he's got hair, or this devotee doesn't wear a dhoti, or this devotee, whatever. There's a million ways you can judge devotee. This devotee doesn't eat rice, dal, and chapatis. He eats pizza. What's wrong with him? There's like a million ways you can judge, but every judgment is really a statement that something's wrong with you, which is another way of saying there's nothing wrong with me. Otherwise, why I'm so concerned about what's wrong with you? Why am I not concerned about what's wrong with me? So you can see prejudice manifesting in your own mind, in your own heart, when you're looking at devotees. Krishna means beginner. Level 1. Madhyam, middle, and Uttama, top. It's just a division. Bottom, middle, top. But someone who is termed a Kanishna devotee, as opposed to Madhyam or intermediate, is this tendency to judge, tendency to think he's better. It's also described in the Bhagavatam as you can do devotional service within the modes of nature. So if you do devotional service in the mode of ignorance, you tend to think you're better a devotee than everybody, which is, of course, the opposite of the Kanishta, of the Uttama, who thinks everyone's better than him. So if you find yourself looking at devotees thinking, why is this devotee doing this, or why aren't they doing that, or what's wrong with this devotee, or that's more of a Kanishta mentality. And at least we should be conscious of it or aware of it. And then we're minimizing other devotees or judging them in terms of what's wrong with them. A more advanced stage is to appreciate what's right with them. And you might say, well, it's difficult to appreciate what's right with someone when I don't see that they have so many qualities, good qualities. But we should think it's me that's not seeing the good qualities, and a me that's focused on the bad qualities. And if I'm focused on the bad qualities of someone, then I should reflect, why do I need to focus on the bad qualities, or the so-called bad qualities, or why do I need to focus on what's lacking in this devotee? If I'm not in a position of an authority that's meant to correct them, why do I need to focus on it? And why am I not appreciating them? Why am I not just happy to see here's a person who's a devotee? And so there may be different reasons for different devotees why we do that. It may be our own frustration. There could be many things, but the fact that we do it is unhealthy, and it's indicative of a immature mentality. And as you know, anyway, it's a problem because when you become a devotee, there's so many standards that we try to follow, and so it's quite easy to judge people by those standards. And in one sense, it's okay if you do it in order to evaluate your own self or try to understand what's lacking. But in terms of judging people, oftentimes what happens is that as we judge people, we develop a dislike for them, for their behavior, for their mentality. And one of the interesting principles of bhakti, devotional service, is that we should never have ill feelings towards a devotee. It's actually considered an offense to have an ill feeling towards a devotee. So if I see you and I just think, oh, you are so this or so that or so not this or so not that, just by I see your behavior, you're not acting in a way that I think is ideal for a devotee, then I'm not really happy to see you. So Padma Purana says that one of the offenses Vaishnava Aparadhas is to not be happy to see a devotee. This is really interesting to meditate on, because the prejudices we have by which we judge devotees make us unhappy to see that devotee. Oh, there's so-and-so. They're always this or always that. Or why are they dressed that way? What's wrong with them? Or why are they not staying for the program? What's wrong with them? There's so many things wrong with all of us. That's a fact. And when we notice what's wrong with one another, then it's very easy to develop some kind of aversion. So, and that's not helpful. It's not proper. It's not the way a devotee. It's not the way a devotee sees another devotee. It's not supposed to be. Judgment is not supposed to be the standard. Of course, you can say, well, you're supposed to know who's a Kanishta and who's Madhyam, who's second, and who's a first-class devotee, so you know how to associate. So you make friends with people like yourself, and you help the juniors, and you serve the seniors. Yeah, but that's different than prejudice and dislike. Yeah, you want to reveal your mind to your peers, your friends. And so you know who your friends are, you know who the juniors are. They're just starting out, or they're younger than you. Or they're not starting out, but they're younger than you. And you generally know who your superiors are by age, by initiation, or by advancement. But that doesn't require, it's not going to mean that I dislike someone because they're not as advanced as I am. So, we were bringing up this topic in relation to hearing, because if we want to be able to serve devotees by hearing what they have to offer us and listening to them in order to help them, then if there's prejudice involved, sometimes we'll just judge, we can't hear. And if you're just doing the service of hearing somebody, listening to them, then during that time, if you have judgments about them, you're not going to be able to hear well, or not be able to hear at all, or you're going to be inclined to say something negative about them when you should just be listening. So I think it's valuable for all of us to reflect on our own prejudices, which we all have, which we all developed for so many years and so many lifetimes. And it's all connected with the bodily connection. My body's better than yours, or I have talents, or I have beauty, or I have intelligence, which is better than yours. But that makes me better than you, so then I judge you. Yes? I'm going to go to your questions. I keep getting these Facebook messages. It's actually it may be difficult to admit prejudices we have. And you see with Prabhupada, well, one of the things that Shruti Kirti said, he said to after a darshan, he said to Prabhupada, he said, everybody loves you. And Prabhupada said, yes, that's because I love everyone. And it's so important. It's such an important point that if we're going to spread Krishna consciousness, we're not going to go out on the street corner and tell everyone they're going to hell, because everyone feels like, okay, this person hates me, or they feel like this person is cursing me. But Prabhupada made people feel comfortable, even the ones that he chastised. Okay, give them prasadam. Then he was very friendly. It was like he was talking philosophy. That's a different thing. But it wasn't that Prabhupada disliked somebody in and of themselves. Oh, I don't dislike you. You're an American. You're a Malecha. Or you're a Russian. I don't like you. No, it wasn't like that. We told the story how when Prabhupada was in Africa and the devotees were preaching to the Indians, he said, why are you preaching to the Indians? Like, to preach to the African people. So, the Indians are Indians, and they know what is Varnashram, what is Veda. They're also a wealthy class of people, easy to make devotees, supporters, and so on. So you would think, or Prabhupada might have said, well, preach to the Indians, because they'll support us, they'll naturally be Krishna conscious. But he didn't. When devotees went to England, he said the same thing, preach to the local people, not to the Indians. Prabhupada understood Indians will come naturally, not that he didn't want us to preach to Indians. They'll come naturally. They're naturally attractive. But so we see that Prabhupada's affection was without discrimination. So that's what it means to be a preacher. You can't allow any kind of prejudice to get in the way. You actually have to have affection for people. And you have to feel that they're suffering and you want to help them. So Krishna Karshan, he says, what you're saying sounds for me like very high level of compassion. I don't feel I'm able to share Krishna consciousness with all people without discrimination. It looks like, well, see, there's two things. What we can do and what we're advised to do. So it's not always a question that I have to have that level of compassion, but it's a question of acting on it, and then it will develop. Like sometimes, like I tell this story. When I first went to South Africa, and I went out on book distribution, I was avoiding people. I wouldn't approach them because they look like the kind of people, excuse me for a second. They look like the kind of people that, okay, I'm going to take this light off my head. It's kind of tea light, right? I would avoid approaching people because they look like the kind of people that in America wouldn't take books. So I didn't approach him. And later I found out that the South Africans are different, and those people that I weren't approaching were very open to Krishna consciousness. And so I was, by my prejudice, or whatever you want to call it, lack of compassion, I was avoiding people that could be interested in Krishna consciousness. So then we learned, I think every book distributor learned, that you can't always, obviously you have sometimes you can tell this person looks better than that person, but you can't always tell. And so often, especially when we're in places where there weren't a lot of people, you wouldn't want to avoid anybody, because if you avoid that, there's no loss in approaching somebody and they say no. It's no different than not approaching them. So we learned that sometimes we just have to approach everyone without discrimination, without judging whether they'll take a book or not. And we would find so many people would take books that we didn't think would take books. So, maybe you don't like a certain race of people, and then you say, I'm not going to distribute books to those people. But that's not right. That's not where our compassion goes to everyone. Just like when we're at Woodstock, there's a lot of kids that come and they're drunk. And so, but they're nice and pious. It's a Catholic country. So we have to see that piety in there, even though they're half naked and drunk. We have to see that. So we think, well, I don't, obviously we don't talk to drunk people, but I'm saying they're a little intoxicated, but a lot of them are still sincere. And I found, at least there in Woodstock, if you're just respectful and kind, considerate, and you show affection, you don't try to judge them, they appreciate you. And these same people come back every year. And some of the hecklers come back and they're very sympathetic because we didn't judge them, we didn't push them away. So what many devotees have experienced is that, okay, my compassion, I don't have a lot of compassion, but Prabhupada has asked me to be compassionate. So then I represent his compassion, and then I don't discriminate. Even though I discriminate, I don't discriminate, because he doesn't discriminate, and because he wants me to do this, so I'm representing him, so I do it. And then by doing it, I see that the compassion, it develops within me. And although I didn't really have it, but because I'm trying to represent Prabhupada's compassion, it seems to be developing within me. So that's how Krishna consciousness works. Everything develops through practice. And so, I may not see everyone equally, but in a sense I have to force myself if I don't see everyone equally, because that's the way I'm supposed to see it. At least in distribution of Krishna consciousness, I may discriminate in terms of, well, I'll be more successful in this city or with this people, but it's not a discrimination which is coming from any lack of compassion. It's just coming from a practical analysis of how we'll be more successful. People that are into this, or people in this age group, or we go to some program where people will be more interested in Krishna consciousness, or like we distribute books at concerts, lots of young people in a good mood, they all take books. But once we're at the concert, we don't discriminate. We give Krishna consciousness equally. And we equally feel that everyone equally needs Krishna consciousness. The point is, and I've said it many times, and it's an important point, that in order to have some kind of compassion, we can't hate anybody, we can't dislike people. It's not the way a devotee thinks. The devotee feels compassion to everybody, and he tries to give, if possible, everyone Krishna consciousness. And if I can't give them Krishna consciousness, it's not because I'm not compassionate, I don't like them, I just don't know how to do it. Or I don't see that person's not ready for it. But part of how you become compassionate is you just realize everybody is unhappy without Krishna, or suffering, even the ones who are happy. It's like if you get on an airplane, which I do often. So you walk through first class. It doesn't look like the people sitting in first class are any happier than anybody else. Their body may be suffering less on the flight, but doesn't mean their mind isn't. Doesn't mean their life isn't. Doesn't mean they're not experiencing anxiety. Doesn't mean they don't get sick. It doesn't mean they're not getting old. So when you feel like that, when you see people and you feel that, the anxiety, everybody experiences anxiety, like all the anxiety this person is going through. There's so much, and we can help them. We can give them a Maha Mantra. You just imagine what your life would be like without Prabhupada's books. And all these people are walking around, they don't have them. And it's just their thinking is not 100% clear. Their acting is not 100% clear. It can't be. It can be good, they can be smart and so on, but they're lacking transcendental knowledge, and that holds them back in so many ways. And everybody's getting old, and nobody wants to get old. Especially, when you're getting older, 50s, 60s, it's the body's breaking down. It's not fun. And then you're starting to think, oh, I don't have that much longer to live. It causes a lot of anxiety. And you might have been very, very slim and muscular and beautiful when you're young, and you're not anymore. So you, by your own experience, like Krishna says, by your own experience, you understand the sufferings of others. So just by having a body, we know how difficult it is to have a body, to have a mind. We know how difficult it is to deal with the mind. And so we feel compassion because all these people have bodies and minds, and you know what they're going through. You know because you have a body. So if you think every embodied being who's stuck in this body, when they get sick, they can't get out of this body. When somebody does something to hurt them emotionally or mentally, they can't get out of the body. They have to suffer emotional, mental, psychological pain. If their wife or husband leaves or cheats on them, they have to suffer that pain. And you know how painful it is if you're very, very attractive, very, very beautiful, and then you get older and your body's just breaking down, and you lose your beauty, you lose your strength, or your mind's not sharp. You can't do the things you did when you were young. You're in a wheelchair. It's like so painful. So that's how we see. So that will bring compassion. Even maybe by nature, I don't have compassion, or preaching to everyone without discrimination. But the thing that's without discrimination is the suffering. Everybody's suffering, right? Does that make sense? Is it not that as a devotee we have discriminate with who we are dealing with, so how to do without judging? Judging is like, I like you, I don't like you. You're good, you're bad. You're smart, you're stupid. So I have to judging isn't, that's not true, because judging isn't always bad. But what I was saying before is judgment which leads into feelings or a view of a person that is not aligned with how a devotee sees people. That's the problem. Okay, you're such and such. If I associate with you, it's going to have an ill effect on me. So I recognize that. You're not a devotee yet, or you're not inclined, or maybe you're very inclined to sinful activities. If I associate with you, I may become inclined to sinful activities. But does that mean I feel I'm better than you? Does that mean I should hate you? That's where the problem comes. So that kind of judgment, that is not Krishna consciousness, But you see, when you think in terms of compassion, you think, oh, I pray to Krishna, this person will someday understand Krishna consciousness, be open to Krishna consciousness, take a book and read it. Like you distribute a book and they don't take it, you could pray for that person. But to think, I hate you because you didn't take a book, or I hate you because you're from Germany, or I hate you because you're Latino, or it's like, I don't like you because you're Latino, and all Latinos are like this, or all Americans are like this, or all Canadians are like this. That's not the way a devotee thinks. And you can't be successful in your preaching if you think that way. Because people have to feel accepted as they are, and they have to feel embraced into Krishna consciousness so that they can come in any condition and be accepted. Okay, it's okay, whatever level you're on, you're trying, be accepted. And it's not that, well, one of the problems we face in America is that there's so many Indians in America, so many more Indians than were here when Prabhupada was here. And so it's a weird kind of problem. It's a problem, but it's not a problem, but it becomes a problem. The problem is that so many Indians are attracted to Krishna consciousness in the West. So you might say, well, why is that a problem? Well, it becomes a problem when the number of Indians is in the majority. And so then the American people feel like uncomfortable or feel like it's an Indian temple, they don't belong here. So that's natural that they would feel that way. I mean, could you imagine when you joined, like when I joined, it was all just young Americans my age. So it was very easy. We're all the same. We're all like one another. But if it was all Indians, I don't know how I would feel. But if the Indians made me feel welcome and accepted, and this is my home, and this is for everybody, then it would be easier. Right? But you can see naturally how we would feel. So you don't want to make people feel like the temple is not their place, or they don't have a place within Krishna consciousness because of whatever reason. They're not this or that enough, or they're too much of this or that. And so, and to be able to express that to people oftentimes is not expressed in words. It's expressed because of your feelings and your actions, which will represent your feelings. So that's why I was saying that without a certain level of not being judgmental and which would then leads to more compassion, we can't be successful. Then we'll just be condemning people, and we'll be creating me and you. You know, a lot of devotees have noticed we have this us and them mentality, which I think is prominent in many religions. You know, the karmis, the non-devotees. So one devotee was saying, I don't like to call them non-devotees or karmis. I like to call them aspiring devotees, because I like to see them as aspiring devotees. And of course, your words reflect either reflect your consciousness or create your consciousness, or both. So I know for myself, in my preaching, it's most effective, and my book distribution is most effective when I see everyone as a devotee. Oh, that person could be a devotee. He is a devotee, he just doesn't know. It was always so much easier. But I think, oh, that's not a devotee, he'll never become a devotee. Then it didn't work. So it was always exciting to see that, well, you're all devotees, you just don't know it. It's not that you're not devotees, it's just you don't know you are. And I'm supposed to be the person to tell you. And, you know, maybe this life you're not ready to hear, but I see you as a devotee. There's an interesting psychological reality, and it's often taught to parents, that you should see your kids as you want them to be. And don't tell your kids like, oh, you'll never be this, you'll never be that. You tell them, yeah, I could see that you could really do well in this, and you could achieve this, and you could become this. And so because the kids will tend, and this is true for adults, they'll tend to move towards what you expect of them. So you expect your kids to do well. That's how you feel towards them. You're very encouraging. You have a lot of confidence in them. Even if you don't express it in words and you just feel that way, it gets transmitted, and they will do better. People will do better when the people around them have confidence in them. So if you're dealing with somebody and you're seeing them as potentially a devotee, like there are people, obviously, that come to our movement, and when we meet them, we're thinking to ourselves, this person is a devotee. They naturally have all the characteristics and realizations of a devotee. And it's easier for them to become a devotee because we're seeing them as a devotee, and we actually start dealing with them like they're a devotee. Hey, you want to put on a sari? You want to put on some tilak? Why are we saying that? Because we see them like devotees. You should be wearing tilak. You're a devotee, isn't it? But if you think, oh, you'll never be a devotee, and you're this and that, and people from your ethnicity are like this and that, so why don't you just leave? Obviously, that's not going to work. And do we think that way? I can't say you do or you don't, but if you have any of that thinking within you, it's preventing the spreading of Krishna consciousness. It has to be. It has to be in the mood that everyone's potentially a devotee, and I'm here to help in any way I can. Like we're in Polish Woodstock, and some of the people are, even if they're not drunk, they're just in a really good mood, and they can get a little rowdy and so on. And Poland is a lot different than America. It's a lot more pious. And Americans, it's a lot more Catholic and pious, in my experience. So even when the kids are rowdy, I'm always seeing their piety, because a lot of things that you say in Poland, if you said in America, people would boo you, and in Poland they applaud you because they're more religious. That's just my experience. So even they're a little drunk or a little rowdy or a little wild listening to all this rock and roll music, I don't see them that way. I don't see them externally. They're hanging, they're half naked and hanging out with their girlfriend with a beer in their hand. But I see a pious, religious Polish person inside that just for this weekend is kind of going a little crazy. So I don't deal with what I'm seeing externally, I'm dealing with what I'm seeing internally. And I think in dealing that way, at least I noticed that it has a really good effect on them, because I think they feel that I'm not judging them at all, and I'm just speaking to them as a soul. At least that's my experience. And you probably have similar experiences, that if you deal with people as souls that have potential to be Krishna conscious rather than anything external. Oh, I don't like Polish people, they eat too much meat or drink too much beer, why preach to them? And it doesn't work. You really have to love the people you're preaching to. And the more you love them, the more they'll feel your love and the more successful you'll be. Okay. So that's something we have to work on in our own heart, for sure. Krishna Karshani says, Prabhupada with acting, level of compassion, how a conditioned person like me can develop more compassion and understanding. And understanding for both the devotee and non-devotee. I still have lots of envy, which is probably the cause of my judgments. I think maybe you've answered your question. But, Prabhupada's answer was the same answer I gave before, that if you serve people, you try to give people Krishna consciousness, then you're acting compassionately, even if you're not compassionate. But the point you're bringing up here is, if I don't feel like doing that, let's say I don't have compassion, I don't even feel like giving it, then we have to look at our own heart, look at our own self and say, well, it may not be prejudice, it just may be that, I don't like, I'm selfish. I only like dealing with these kinds of people, not these kinds of people. Or it could be prejudice, it could be envy, it could be so many things. And the purpose of talking about this was to get you to reflect, not that I want to tell you you're not compassionate or you're envy or you're judgmental. I'm just describing the symptoms of it. And so that's up to you to look in your own heart and see, okay, how am I feeling about people? And how am I feeling about devotees when they come to me with their problems, they want me to hear them. Am I thinking, oh, this devotee, he's so this, she's so that? Or am I just open to listen? Am I feeling, oh, this devotee is suffering. I can help them by listening to them and letting them get this off their chest and letting them get this problem out in the open and discussing it. I can do that service rather than thinking, this is such a stupid problem. I can't believe that you would have this problem. We may be thinking like that. And even though we're thinking like that and we don't express it, which obviously we shouldn't, it can affect our ability to listen and affect their ability to speak. So I'm just bringing up this reality that as conditioned souls, we have lots of prejudice that have been gained in this life and many lifetimes. So that's just a reality we have to deal with, and we see that pure devotional service is free from that, and the more our movement is free from this, the better. Now, you might say, okay, I understand this, but some of the leaders don't seem to be free from this. And if that's true, if you're in a situation where you find maybe some of the leaders you're dealing with seem to be very judgmental and putting people into boxes and so on, then, and you don't like that, and you see it's not helping you and it's not helping others, then at least you make a note of that if I have authority over people, I don't want to deal with them this way because I don't like being dealt with this way. It's not working for me, and I can see it's not working for other devotees. So you can learn from that. So rather than judge that person as a bad leader, you make a note that when I lead, I want to make sure that I'm more equal to people and more open, because I don't think this other system works. Now, one thing I've noticed is that some leaders may be judgmental because they were raised, so to speak, by leaders who were judgmental. And those leaders may be innocently judgmental. Maybe they thought that was the way to manage, the way to lead, or that's what Krishna consciousness is, You're a good devotee, you're not a good devotee. You're a devotee, you're non-devotee, you're karmi, you're guru, you're new bhakta. And so there was like too much discrimination, which wasn't Krishna conscious. And so that's how they were trained. So they did the same thing. So, it goes back to the same principle. If you don't like what someone's doing, but you don't want to develop a hatred for them, and you want to always appreciate that they're a devotee. And if you don't like what they're doing, you can still love the person and not like what they're doing. And you could note that if what you think they're doing doesn't work, let me know to not do it. Because we all have the same tendency. When we get control or power, we may misuse it. We may demand authority that we don't deserve, and so forth. Wilfred says, in New York City, there's a sect of Hasidic Jews who are sent out to spread their faith. But how they do it is kind of funny. They literally go up to the people and ask if they're Jewish. Unfortunately, yeah. Well, you can't be Hasidic. You can't join if you're not Jewish. They forget that Jews can be of any race. Ethiopian Jews, for instance. I just thought it was funny because they never asked you, right? Well, materialistic religion. I mean, Judaism, yeah, in that sense, if your mother's not Jewish, you can't go to Israel. You could become an Israeli citizen if your mother's Jewish. Yeah, so, it's the bodily conception. Thank you for pointing that out. But that makes the point that religion can lead into this kind of thing, this kind of prejudice and judgment. It's very prominent. And so we also have to be aware of that for ourselves. Krishna Karshani says, the problem in preaching or dealing with devotees might be that someone may not like people by nature. Maybe my question is funny, but how to start to like people? Oh, yeah. No, I've seen that's true, that some devotees don't like people. Of course, those devotees generally stay to themselves and are not preachers, and they don't interact much, and they're very introverted, and so how do you like people? That's a hard question for me to answer, because I've never come from a point where I didn't like people, or I would isolate myself from people, or I didn't want to give people Krishna consciousness. It sounds more like a psychological issue than a Krishna conscious issue. But of course, one of the solutions that I've seen is just go out and, hand out flyers, hand out mantra cards, go on Harinam, do something to share Krishna consciousness. Because generally, when you have a problem, the solution is always to act in the opposite way. So it's just like, I don't like people. All right, we'll go out and distribute prasadam. Do something kind for people. You do the opposite. You say, I don't feel like doing anything for anybody. All right, now you should go out and do something for somebody. Because so often the cure is the opposite. I had read that if you're an extrovert, it's good to be alone sometimes and do private things. If you're an introvert, it's good to be out with people, because your tendency is not to be with people, good to be out with people. And the extrovert, your tendency is always to be around people talking, and so sometimes you need quiet time by yourself. So often solutions are to do the opposite. So it seems like there's a universal answer. Go out and spread Krishna consciousness. That will help us overcome prejudices. It will awaken more compassion. It will awaken more kindness. I think everyone has that experience, that it kind of forces you. Because you're just giving, and you're not getting anything from it. You're just trying to help people. And so it forces you to be kinder. Of course, you could run away from that and think, oh, these people, they're so nasty. I don't want to talk to them. But if you do it in the right consciousness, even if they're not so nice, but it can force you just to at least be nice, learn how to be nice to them. I think we all have that experience. So, we have Anantasesha Vaishnavi, who says, I agree with your point of judgmentalism. How do you reconcile that with Nectar of Devotion, verse 5, where we're asked to discriminate? Yeah, we talked about that earlier. I think the essential point here is, how can you discriminate without being judgmental? And how can you discriminate without developing any kind of negativity towards the person you discriminate? It's just like, okay, there's a snake on my property. I shouldn't get close to that snake. All right. So I have to make some discrimination because this snake could bite me. Right? So, okay. I mean, it's not like I hate this particular snake, but I can't love this snake. So I just have to stay away. So some people, our Shastra says, some people, and you probably experience this, are snake-like. They're very envious by nature. So we stay away from such people. But see, the point is, we don't allow ourselves to degrade into the mode of ignorance by hating anybody. We might hate what they do, and if they're blaspheming Krishna, we will defend Krishna. We may become angry, but that's not generated from the mode of ignorance. So, okay, we have to discriminate. Here's a non-devotee, or here's a devotee, and then there are three classes of devotees. But in that discrimination, why are we discriminating? Because I'm discriminating your junior. Why? So I can serve you. That's why. I'm discriminating your senior. Why? So I can serve you. I'm discriminating your peer, so we can share Krishna consciousness, and I can serve you that way. So it's all evolving around service. Right? So the problem is, it is judgments that are not based on Krishna consciousness. They're simply based on our own prejudices, our own likes and dislikes, our own hatreds and loves. The problem with love is, material love, is when you love someone, it generally means you hate somebody else. Oh, I love these people. Well, what people do you hate? It generally works like that. Or it often is like that. Loving one class is at the expense of hating another class. So, being judgmental in itself is necessary. If there's danger, I have to judge that. I have to judge so many things. But to judge in a way that causes us to mistreat people, that's the problem. To judge in a way where we are unnecessarily identifying people as a race and then hating them or mistreating them, that's the problem. So the point that we see in Prabhupada's life and what he was encouraging us is that Prabhupada, he just wanted to give Krishna to everybody. That was his mood. That was what was in his heart. And he wasn't discriminating. And you see, Prabhupada went everywhere around the world. When he was invited somewhere, he went there. He didn't think, oh, what's the use of going here? These people aren't that well educated, or this country isn't that important. No, he'd go. Anyone who invited him, practically he would go. He was always ready to give Krishna consciousness. So why? Because of his compassion. So that we're trying to develop. And in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says, I don't want to put, it's cold in here and I don't want to put my heater on, because then if my heater's on, then this whole recording's going to have a fan in the background. So I am suffering here. So put my hood on. In the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada describes that other spiritualists are engaged in their spiritual practice because they want the bliss or they want liberation. You know that in the Bhagavatam it describes devotional service in the mode of goodness as wanting relief from suffering. You serve Krishna for relief. So it's still within the modes of nature. So these spiritualists may be in the mode of goodness. They want liberation. They want spiritual happiness. And Prabhupada, he said, that's not a very mature degree of spirituality. It has a lot of selfishness in it. And then Prabhupada said, what distinguishes the Vaishnavas is they want to help other people. And so he concluded that compassion is the most outstanding quality of a Vaishnava. And I think we can see from this discussion how compassion neutralizes prejudice and negative judgments and mistreatments. And so imagine you're a leader and you're just concerned to help the devotee. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what they're doing, how they're thinking, as much as what matters is how you can help them. So maybe a devotee comes up to you and says, Prabhu, you asked me to do this, but it's really difficult. Can I do another service? So you take it compassionately. You think, okay, how is this other service hurting you? And they say, well, this and that, and I have to work with this devotee, and they're difficult to work with, and I'm this kind of person. You go, okay, so you can do this other service. Or you might take it the other way. No, this is how it's done here. You have to do everything I say. So and if you don't do it, you're not a good devotee. So there's the lack of compassion there. And so the lack of compassion then leads to a lack of understanding, and then that devotee is going to be discouraged, and probably that devotee will go away at some point if you're very heavy, and that devotees, especially if they're sensitive. So you can see how compassion is really a panacea to so many problems. Can we call them not yet devotees? Yeah. We can call them potential devotees. We have devotees and potentials. Or we can call them, we have devotees and those who don't know, and devotees who don't know their devotees. Let's go out and preach to the devotees who don't know their devotees yet. Because words are defining how you'll see something. So, I think when we use the word karmi, it has a very negative connotation, doesn't it? Like there's a devotee here named Divyanga, and he's a book distributor. He's been distributing books since day one. He's a Prabhupada disciple. And he always refers to people as the jiva, which is an interesting way because he's seeing them as soul. He's not seeing them as body. So that's another way of seeing it. So instead of saying karmis, you can say the jivas, the souls. There's so many jiva souls that we have to give Krishna consciousness to. It's nice. So the words are affecting our consciousness. And karmi is not a derogatory statement. I think it has become one in ISKCON. It's just a statement of a person who's not following Vedic principles and therefore they're creating karma. But I think for us who are not yet evolved in Krishna consciousness, especially when the movement was young, the word karmis took on a very negative connotation as people who are sinful, maybe stupid, maybe dirty, maybe karmi and meat eater becomes synonymous, You know what I'm saying? So I like this word jiva. The jivas were, let's go out and save the jivas. Jiva means the soul, the souls, the spirit souls. There's so many jivas who are suffering. That's different than saying there's so many karmis who are suffering. Now, if you say karmi as meaning one who's creating bad karma and you want to save them from their bad karma, then yeah, that's nice. But I think that's not always how we use it, if even at all we use it that way. Because if you come to Krishna consciousness and you hear that the non-devotees are called karmis, and you don't even know what that word means in Sanskrit, maybe the person who's told you doesn't even know or doesn't understand completely, and then, okay, non-devotees are karmis. Non-devotees are dirty, they're bad. You can pick that up if you're not careful. From reading our books, you can pick that up if you're not careful. Right? Krishna Karshini says, thank you. Come out with this topic. I see that I have many prejudices. Yeah, we all do. And the point of this class was to look at them and be aware, at least you'll be aware of them now, and try to be compassionate for those that maybe you don't like. Because the devotee is always compassionate. The devotee is always kind. So our challenge is, well, how to be kind to the people we don't like, or the people who hurt us, or the people who say nasty things about us. That is what it means to be a devotee. It's just what it is. Wilfred says, I'm pretty much an introvert, but when it comes to talking to people about Krishna, it's easy to talk, to approach people. Yeah. That is nice. And sharing Krishna consciousness is so relishable. And we've seen that with many devotees who are introverts, and they come out of their introversion to share Krishna consciousness. And Krishna Karshini says, the interesting thing is that those who hate people are attracting to their lives people who make them believe that people are not worthy of loving. Low attraction rule. It's quite difficult to get out of a cycle. Low attraction rule. It's quite difficult to get out of a cycle of hating or not liking people. Yes, it seems to be a psychological issue. Yeah. So, well, this brings up the point that sometimes spiritual knowledge doesn't solve the problem, because the problem, spiritual knowledge can bring awareness to a problem, but sometimes the problem is not always spiritual. It can be psychological, but it seems to have a lack of, it seems to be spiritual because spiritual consciousness means loving everyone and accepting everyone. And if you become Krishna conscious, you will love and accept everyone. But the problem, until you become Krishna conscious, may not just be a lack of Krishna consciousness. It may be samskars of, being raised in a certain way to dislike certain people, to hate certain people. And when you see them, you just feel, you're like, I don't like you. And one of the most interesting things about this, and you've all probably experienced this, there may be a race of people that you just grew up not liking, but when you meet the individuals, you realize they're just like me. They're just the same. And, maybe their food's different, their clothes is different, their language is different, But when it boils down to everyone have the same desire. They want to be peaceful, they want to be happy, they want to have friends, they want to have family. So you start to see, well, this person is so much more like me than I ever thought. And you also see that about non-devotees. Non-devotees understand many, many things that are very Krishna conscious. And they want to be happy, we want to be happy. It's just maybe they're going about being happy in the wrong way. They want to have families, we want to have families. They want to have friends, we want to have friends. They want to avoid suffering, we want to avoid suffering. So, the less we make distinctions between ourselves and others, the more effective we'll be in communicating with people. And as I'm saying, communication is really coming from affection. That people feel that you accept them, you like them, you don't judge them. That's great, because everybody, how many people are giving affection to people they don't even know? That's quite a rare thing. And that's supposed to be the mood of a Vaishnava. It's true that most of us devotees are karmis because most of us doing karma yoga by offering the result of our actions. I consider myself a karmi. Well, be a good karmi, so you create good karma. So Karshini will call you a good karmi. Create good karma. Of course, we don't want to create karma because then you'll go back. You'll have to take a body. So when you link it to Krishna, then that's transcendental good karma. But I think that the point is, when I find it valuable in my own preaching work, the more we see that people are like us or we're like people, there's not such huge differences. The differences are more based on the ignorance that people have. So when we educate them, then you can see a lot of people become devotees quite easily, or they take to Krishna consciousness in some way. So they're not that far away from it. And I like to see, what helps me in my work is I like to see people are very close to Krishna. They're really, really close. It's like they're almost there, but we have to just push them over the fence. And if I see like that, I find myself it has so much more effect on them, and I'm more effective as a teacher or preacher. If I see that they're far away, then that affects me. It's like that example I often give of the I think it was a high school or a middle school in New York, and after they evaluated all the students, they divided them into 3 groups: the best students, the middle students, the low students. And they took the middle students and they put them in a special class or special classes, and they told the teachers these were the top students. And it was an experiment. They wanted to see what would happen if the teachers thought these were the top students. So the teachers dealt with them as top students, which means the teachers thought that these people were more disciplined, more focused, more intelligent, they had better study habits, whatever. So that's how they dealt with them. And then what they found was so interesting, that those middle students performed better than the top students. So that being true, then how does that affect how we see people? So if you think, oh, these people, they'll never become, they're just meat eaters and this and that, they'll never become Krishna conscious. So how is that going to help anything? But if you see people, no, you're a devotee, you're so close to Krishna consciousness, it's just you need this knowledge, you need this mantra, you need this association. If you see like that, that's going to make a difference. It has to make a difference. I think that's just logical, practical, obvious, isn't it? So I find in my own life, whether it's book distribution or preaching in general or being on a college campus meeting students, the more I see people as devotees, like when I'm talking to them and I see, I'm looking at them and I'm seeing this person with a shaved head and a devotee in tila, or this girl in a sari. Sometimes I do that, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but sometimes I see them like they're so like maybe I'm preaching to a girl and I could see she's a devotee, but she's not dressed like one. And in my mind, I just see her in a sari. I go, I don't want to see you in this tank top and shorts. You're a devotee. You're not supposed to be dressed like this. I just naturally think like that. And I think it really helps. And I think that this is how Prabhupada saw, and this is how Prabhupada wanted us to see. And if you try to see this way, you're going to see that your preaching is going to be more effective. You're going to see how people they'll connect with you more deeply. They'll feel closer to you. They'll feel more accepted and more loved. And they'll want to be around you, and they'll want to learn. Because if they feel that from you, then they'll think, well, if this is what Krishna consciousness does to you, I want it. And that thinking may be totally subconscious. But it's obvious to understand they would think that way. Wilfred says, I practice compassion on subways. I see all the jivas suffering, being all in a crunch, traveling to and from the toil, unsatisfactory work. Everyone looks so unhappy. Yeah, I do that also. There's I think that was Prabhupada's constant state of consciousness. It's seeing these people working, or as you use the word, toiling. That's beyond work. That's like suffering work or toiling. It's torturous work. And Prabhupada, seeing people going through this, there's a story where he had tears in his eyes when he was walking in a park, and people very early in the morning there's a lot of traffic, and they were coming early to get a place to park near downtown. I think maybe it was expensive to park downtown, so they'd park around it. Or they could park for free. And he asked, what are they doing? And he said, well, they're coming early to go to work. Prabhupada said, they're working so hard, they're coming this early. Then Shruti Kirti said there was a tear in Prabhupada's eye when he was saying that. So we can understand that Prabhupada is feeling this way, that he's seeing people toiling, crunched up on the subway, driving to work, and it makes him cry. That they could be Krishna conscious, they don't have to live this way. That's how we should be thinking. And that, of course, will naturally develop as you become Krishna conscious. But until it develops, we should be feeling and thinking this way, because if we are, this is how Krishna consciousness is going to spread. And if we don't feel this way, we don't want to create an institution where it's us and them. And it's very easy for that to happen. We're good, they're bad, we're right, they're wrong. So Wilfred says, it doesn't mean I don't have prejudice, I just try to be aware of it. And again, the best way to overcome the prejudice is with compassion. Kishori Mani Dasi says, very often in the subway I imagine people in the Saryadoti. Good, we're on the same page. I was thinking I'm the only one that does that. I think we should all do that. Yeah, that's a good practice. You could all try that. That was the conclusion. So everyone says, well, everyone who missed the class, if they ask, what is the class about? You can say, well, the class was about imagining everyone you see in a dhoti and a sari. Of course, someone may say, but what about Krishna West? Okay, imagine them in shirt, pant, coat, skirt, and neck beads and tilak. Or imagine them shirt, pant, coats, and chanting Hare Krishna. Some of them imagine them as devotees. This person could become a devotee. And we cry in our heart to see that they're not a devotee, and that our movement has not succeeded in reaching them yet. And so we're crying, what's wrong with us? We have to reach everybody. That's the pain of the devotee. And we don't care what your background is, or how you dress or whatever. We just see the jiva, right? Every culture, people are different, and for us, some cultures, people seem strange, but we see the jiva. We want to help you. Yamal Chandra says, I find it difficult to apply compassion when it comes to others eating meat. What what Veer Krishna Maharaj said about this, he said that when you see someone eating meat, first you feel compassion for the cows, and you feel compassion for this person in the sense that they're going to have to suffer. I think that's natural that we could feel this way. So I feel compassion. This person is going to suffer for doing this, and one way to see this, which is a beautiful way to see this, whenever you see people like smoking or drinking or eating meat or doing anything that is repulsive to us, it's not Krishna conscious. One of the things you could think is, we failed. We're failing as a movement. There's still people eating meat. There's still people drinking. Our movement is failing. We have to do more. We have to get out. What am I doing? What am I doing to spread Krishna consciousness in this city? How am I touching people's lives? How many books am I distributing? How much kirtan am I doing? How many blogs have I written? How many videos have I made? How many whatevers, right? How many Facebook classes or Facebook posts, or how many Facebook posts can I share, and what can I do to make things better? That's how we should think. Rather than thinking, oh, this person's so bad they're eating meat, we're thinking, I'm so bad that he's still eating meat, that I haven't, right? And I feel bad for him because I'm not able, I haven't met him and convinced him. I feel bad for him that he has to do this because he doesn't know any better, and I feel bad for the cow. So that's how the compassion comes. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it's important. Because as I said, Prabhupada said compassion is the essence of a Vaishnava. So if we could see, okay, in every situation, then you can just see, well, how could I apply compassion? How can I apply compassion to resolve the situation? And I think in most cases you would see it resolves it. So now we have a good question from David, or however you say your name, David. Self-compassion. So what does self-compassion mean? You could have a material understanding of self-compassion and a spiritual understanding of self-compassion. So the spiritual understanding of self-compassion would be to give yourself Krishna consciousness. And you're giving yourself Krishna consciousness because Prabhupada wants you to become Krishna conscious. So that's your service to Prabhupada, is to take what he's given you. And so if you want to save yourself, if you're compassionate to yourself, then you'll take what Prabhupada has given you. So that self-compassion is to take the mercy, take the holy name, take Prabhupada's books, take the process, and save yourself and become Krishna conscious. But David, right? David sounds, but that's how they would say it in Israel, I think. David. Material self-compassion would mean taking care of yourself physically and emotionally. And so both things are required. But the thing is, if you're a compassionate person, if your heart is in helping others, then your self-compassion can never be self-centered. So, sometimes when we say self-compassion, it sounds like, oh, that means I'm self-centered. I'm selfish but you're compassionate upon yourself so that you can be of service. So I take care of myself so I can be of service. So taking care of myself is not selfish any longer. It is now service. So I'm reading Prabhupada's books. That could be selfish. I just want this for myself. I just want to relish Krishna consciousness for myself. I don't want to see another person. It could be selfish. But real self-compassion, or a higher level of self-compassion, would be that you're doing all of this so you can share it. So you can give your compassion. So if I don't take care of myself, how will I take care of others? If I'm not healthy, how can I cure others' disease? So self-compassion can be selfish, but in the sense that Prabhupada would use it. It's not selfish at all, but it's you take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. A healthy mother can take care of her children. If she's not healthy or emotionally fit, she can't take care of her children. If she's not spiritually evolved, she can't help them spiritually. So we always think that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can be fit to take care of others. Is that okay? So Krishna Karshani said, we had a discussion with my husband. He criticized me for sharing on non-devotee Facebook pages about killing animals. My husband said that I'm putting people in anxiety. Well, I don't know what you said, but the art of compassion is to express the truth in a way that doesn't put people in anxiety. Like people ask me why vegetarian, I say, well, put yourself in the place of the animal. And just, think, if you were that animal, and I said, I'm hungry, can I kill you? Wouldn't you want to live? And most people say, well, it's just the hard-headed ones who want to win the argument will say, no, I would die for you. But, so there are ways of doing it. You don't put them in anxiety. And sometimes there is no way to do it without putting them in anxiety. But, the expert preacher, it's like, okay, look at what you're saying like a preparation, and I have to spice it up and put it on a nice plate and a nice tablecloth. I have to make this look attractive. So how could I explain how being vegetarian is attractive? How could I explain that not eating meat in an attractive way? That's the art. So if I explain something which is true, but I explain it in a way that puts everyone in anxiety, obviously it doesn't serve my purpose because people aren't able to hear it, and it puts them in anxiety and they push me away. So preaching doesn't mean that I just explain what's true. It's like teaching, I taught a really good class. Well, how do I know I taught a really good class? It's not whether or not I taught a good class. I will only know based on the student's response. So if the students say, I didn't learn anything in this class, I can't say I taught a good class. Now, even though objectively speaking, it was a good class, I gave good information, but somehow or other I wasn't aware of my students, so the way they understood it was they didn't understand it. I didn't present in a way they understood. But what I presented was really good information, just nobody got it. So that wasn't a good class. I'm not a good teacher. I'm a good teacher, but I'm not. I'm a good preacher, but I'm not good. I'm a good preacher because I repeat everything Prabhupada said, and Prabhupada said that's what good preaching is. You repeat what you got from your guru. I'm not a good preacher because I didn't spice it in a way that people could digest it. People could taste it and go, yeah, this tastes good. I didn't think I'd like it. So that's the art of preaching. So I think that's what your husband is saying. You don't have to tell somebody something's wrong. You can just tell them there's something better. You see, it's just like, if you're compassionate and you want to help somebody, you're not going to tell them something out of your own need to be right and put them down, because that happens sometimes. That happens sometimes in preaching, that we get into this I'm right, you're wrong thing, and our ego gets involved, and I have to prove them wrong. So if you're actually compassionate and you want to help them, the best way to help them is to say, here's an idea. Think about this. There's an alternative. There's something better. You might consider this. I'll give you an example. I was in India and I was staying in Mumbai. It was 1983. And there was a guest. And they put him in the same room with me. So we were talking. And I found out that he was following an impersonal path. So I could have said, well, that's wrong or that's bad or whatever. And I said, oh, that's nice. That's stage one That's stage one. That impersonal realization is stage one. And in Bhakti, we're on stage three. Would you like to hear about stage three? And he was like, oh yeah. He just like, oh, I didn't know that was stage one. I go, yeah, that's a starting point. It's not the end point. Didn't your teacher tell you that? No, no, oh no. Yeah. And he just lit up. He's like, yeah. So I didn't have to put it down. I just had to say there's something better. So I think, when you really want to help people sincerely, out of affection, and you're not disliking them and judging them and, oh, he's a Mayavadi yogi, I don't like him. He's a Mayavadi, he doesn't even know what Mayavadi is. He just is, because that's all he was exposed to, and he was misguided. So if you see it that way, he's just an innocent, misguided person, and you come on that way, I think that's what we want to cultivate. But if we're always just like smashing, what kind of organization do we have? The International Society for Smashing Consciousness. Doesn't make sense. Does it? You like my tilak here? Sunshine tilak. You know what I'm saying? So I think we have to be extremely careful, because we're not going to be successful. Maybe you'll be successful in India that way, but even with this next generation coming up, I think not so much. Maybe older generation, they like to be smashed. But, obviously in the Western countries, that's not the culture. People want to be understood. And so, we understand why people are eating meat. We ate meat also. They were exposed. They don't know any better. So we want to compassionately move them along to the next step. So David says, thank you very much. I read in His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Swami's book that some kind of self-compassion is to follow our spiritual process. Exactly. For example, if someone doesn't follow the principles, he's hurting himself. Exactly. So in one way it means that I'm lacking self-love. Exactly. By the way, pronunciation is from Mexico. David Efan González. ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo está, Prabhu? Hare Krishna. David González. Hare Krishna. Yeah, so that's exactly. People tell me that, people say that I preach like Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, and I never even read his book, and you see, I just said exactly what he said. So we're on the same page, which is a great honor for me to know. I wouldn't say he preaches like me, I would say I preach like him. And it's nice to know that we have some brotherhood bondage here. Bonding. Krishna Karsan said, I'm saying nothing, I'm just sharing among non-veg videos of abusing animals, and obviously some are in anxiety. I believe that some needs to see the truth. Yeah, just figure out how to say it in a better way. Oh, the class on the glories of Bhaktitirtha Swami's teachings. Yeah, if you give me his teachings, then I can read them and then we can discuss it. If you have a section of his teachings you want me to discuss, and you send it to me. So yeah, so Prabhupada said in a letter, it's not like you're a great preacher, I said what was true and everybody went away. At least I said what was true. I was writing a letter to a devotee. He said, that's a failure. I spoke the truth and everybody left. So that's the art of preaching. You want to, like there's this story, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was preaching in America. And Prabhupada wanted him to come back to India. So he was just in America kind of to get away from India because it was so difficult. And the idea was he would stay for a short time, do a little preaching, get rejuvenated, and come back to India. And so Prabhupada came to America and he said, okay, so you're ready to go back to India? He said, no, Prabhupada, I'm preaching. What he meant to say is, I'm having success here preaching, and so why should I go back to America? The results are really good. But he just said, I'm preaching. So that was the connotation. And Prabhupada took it like, oh, you're just making an excuse because you don't want to go back to India. So Prabhupada said, what is this preaching? And then Tamal Krishna said, well, I'll show you. And he brought up, I don't know, 15 or 20 new brahmacharis in saffron, shaved head, tilak. All new devotees that he made since he'd come back to America. And Prabhupada was so happy. He said, yes, this is preaching. You stay in America. So we can't just say we're preaching and not produce anything. I'm preaching the straight sauce, exactly what Krishna says. Well, what's the result? I have no friends, everybody hates me, nobody comes to my temple, no one will take a book. Yeah, great. You know, that, and of course I'm exaggerating, but that does happen to some degree. So we need to be aware of that. That's results. We need results also, right? You agree? Okay, so we're going to stop. It's my breakfast time now. And because it's cold, I'm hungry, because whenever it's cold, one becomes more hungry. So my hunger is pulling me away from you, even though I'm compassionate upon all of you. The best book Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj wrote, Reflection on Sacred Teachings 3. Okay. Maybe I have that somewhere in my house. I have to look. I have to look behind me right now. Do I have it? There's so many books here. Or maybe I have it in my house. I have more books in the house. Okay. I will look. Keep you posted. Okay? Anyway, all right. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Transforming lust into love. Yeah, fantastic. Sounds like a great idea. Transforming hatred into compassion. Transforming prejudice into compassion. Transforming jealousy and envy into compassion. Wow. Fantastic. Okay. Hare Krishna.